Hey everyone, this is Paris. I have an interview that I've really been looking forward to doing the past few months. Back at LA Gamescom, I had the chance to check out Ara History Untold. Got a little bit of hands on time, and ever since then, I really wanted a chance to talk with the team about the game before it comes out later this month. So, joining me, I have Gabriela Leskur. I think I got that right. You are, if I am correct, you are the lead narrative in it. Let me rephrase that again. See, I'm going to mess it up already. I got so happy I got your last name right. I'm going to mess this up.
You got it.
But you are the narrative and experience lead at Oxide Games.
That's
correct. Well, I have Brian Stone, who is the product leader and head of engineering at Xbox Game Studios Publishing. Thank you both for taking a few minutes to talk to me about Ara History Untold. Like I said, I played a little bit at Gamescom LA, but that immediately sparked a million questions. So I have a lot of questions, but there's a few that I definitely want to hone in on. But first and foremost, what is Ara History Untold for people that are watching or listening to this?
Yeah, you want to take this, Gabriela?
Okay, let's go. So Ara History Untold is Xbox's foray and Oxide Games' foray into 4X historical grand strategy. It is a game that gives you the opportunity to play as a leader leading a nation from ancient times up until the near future. So really, it gives you the space to explore who you could or can be if you were at the helm of history.
So let's talk about leaders first. So when you first dive into the game, you see there's a screen with a bunch of different leaders there. Can you talk about the historical accuracy of some of these leaders? Like I noticed you have George Washington, I believe, Nefertiti. I know Shaka Zulu was one of them.
In there. Shaka's in there.
Yeah. So can we kind of talk about the historical relevance of those? Are these historically accurate leaders, as well as what is the difference between picking these different leaders? How will that affect your gameplay?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of leaders in there. They're all real people from real history. So from that perspective, we've leaned into representing historical accuracy as much as possible, because I think that's part of what's fun about these games is like
Right.
you play and you learn, and it's kind of, it's a little bit natural, because you can apply kind of your own innate sort of knowledge of history and how different leaders influenced the kind of scope of world events and apply that to your game. Of course, you pick a leader that you are going to stick with throughout the entire scope of the game, from antiquities to the modern era. So you could argue that like playing as George Washington in 2024 is not going to be strictly historically accurate.
Right.
But I would absolutely say that the intent of every leader is to kind of get to the heart of what characteristics allowed them to make their statement on history in their time, and then reflect those characteristics in the ways in which they buff or influence different systems in the game, so that as you kind of play with the leader that you chose, you are you're going to have a very different experience if you lean into those characteristics.
Okay.
Right. So it's fascinating from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. One other point on that with the leaders and just talking about the historical accuracy. Will there be any scenarios in here where we can play out a historical event as one of these leaders?
I can speak to that. So the game, right, first and foremost, is history untold. So there's always this element of alternate history present.
Right.
But in the narrative events that we have narrative events that are explicitly inspired by a unique leader's history and their lived experience. So our events are ethical, strategic dilemmas that are fictional, but they're based on things that happened in history. So we walk that middle ground of providing you with a unique scenario that might be unique or bespoke to your playthrough, but we have the historical context in there, and many of these are actually based on what the leader lived through in their actual life.
Okay, that's fantastic. Love that. So you even mentioned at the top, This will start in ancient times, and you will take you all the way up to, you said near future, I believe.
Yep.
Yes.
So what are we talking time frame as far as years go? 1,000 years, 2,000 years? What does that look like?
12,000 years.
Oh, there you go.
It's sort of like, yeah. Depends on the spin that you put on it. And you can play, we call it the singularity age, when you sort of move past modern technology, depending on sort of how the various nations have reached that point in time. You can play fairly deep into the singularity age as well. So yeah, it absolutely spans sort of the scope of at least human civilized history.
Gotcha. Now let's try and dive into a little bit of the nitty gritty of what Ara is bringing to the table. So this is a 4X game. Now, is it fair to say this also has some city building elements as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the thing that's been fascinating for me at Xbox, getting to partner with Oxide, kind of to see them make this game, bring it to life, is that they were able to take a genre which is has a lot of fans and a lot of players, and there's a few standouts in this genre, as you might imagine. A lot of people at Oxide have worked on some of those big games,
right?
But because we were doing something that was new, both for them and for Microsoft. This is the first time that Microsoft has, if you look at the Xbox portfolio, first time we've entered the grand strategy space or turn-based gaming at all. We have a lot of great strategy games. Age is one of them. But in terms of historical turn-based strategy, this is an absolute first for us. And what we wanted to do was sort of like free Oxide to really take risks with the genre, and not just sort of like follow through on the formula that has been kind of cemented by others, right? And one of those risks is that there is a ton of depth to the city building in the game. I've compared it in the past, and actually I believe in this comparison that it's almost as if you sort of like take some of the depth of some of my favorite Paradox games, like I don't know, Victoria or Crusader Kings or Anno or something, that are rooted in a specific time period, and you take that depth that comes from being able to focus on a specific time period, but then you spread it out across all of human history.
Right.
So it's a big game.
Again, fantastic. Just like I said, just from the sample size that I've had so far playing the game, I can see, like you talk about, the size and the scope and just all the different options that you're going to have as you go through this experience of basically building out this world. So again, I kind of want to get all the little nitty gritty technical stuff out of the way. So as far as maps goes, I'm assuming we'll have a variety of maps, but are we seeing varying sizes of those? And what's the maximum amount of nations that we can have in one playthrough on a map?
So I believe it depends on what version of the game you're playing on at release, in terms of if you're playing versus AI versus in multiplayer.
Mm-hmm.
We are releasing with 30 plus leaders, and within that, different nations as well. And multiplayer accommodates up to that number.
Oh, wow.
So you can really have a really big map. And our simultaneous turn system really allows for this big multiplayer experience, which is very exciting. And speaking about, again, some of the things that make Ara different, it is a historical grand strategy game, but it also does take influence from city builders, from really economics heavy games, as well as board games, Euro games that are all about managing your unique country or nation across time. So you'll see that reflected in the breadth and depth of the multiplayer, and in this 30 plus nations maybe playing at once on a map.
Wow, that's awesome. That is going to create some very interesting multiplayer scenarios when the game does come out. So really looking forward to that. So one thing that I want to dive into and is government and religion and politics. But before I do that, so again, 4X game, everything that you talked about so far. So obviously resource management, inventory management, and crafting is also a part of this as well. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think some of the things that set Ara apart, right? We talked about the simultaneous turns, which means every turn is happening at the same period of time, and then it's being resolved at the same time during the end turn phase. So that really allows it to go very quickly. You have this incorporation of the prestige system, right, which is a dynamic way to work towards victory. And within that prestige system, we really care about the quality of life of your citizens.
Yeah.
That is how happy and healthy, right, educated they are. And crafting is a big part of how you make an impact on their quality of life. Crafting takes the base resources that you get as passive or active yields in the world, things like copper, things like timber, and then you can repurpose them into these crafted items that can be used as amenities that boost your quality of life and boosts your prestige, or as supplies, which can be used to boost your unique improvements, putting in a plow in a farm, for example. So crafting is a huge part of the game that influences how you win, if you win, and it does so by impacting the quality of life of your citizens.
Oh man, that's going to be fantastic as well. So I keep saying I want to talk about government and religion, but I'm thinking of like 10 other questions as well. So before we go into that, because I think that's going to be pretty extensive. So when you're in the discovery phase, like you can obviously send your scouts out and you're discovering, new regions, things like that. There's actual predators in the game. I know that's more of an early on mechanic that you need to worry about, but can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, the world is full of wonders and dangers, right, Brian?
Yep.
Oh, so yeah, what were you going to say? I saw you.
Oh, nothing. I was just that you're right. The game starts in with a sort of a natural, mostly untouched world.
Mm-hmm.
There's wildlife out there in the world. There are other nations. There's other independent settlements, but much of the world is untouched and there to be explored. And part of that is danger. So as you kind of uncover the map and you explore the living world, you are going to be encountering both friendly and hostile wildlife.
Right.
And but part of getting out there and encountering that is also creating opportunities for the player. So it's a threat, but also an opportunity. Using your scouts to clear wildlife from a region could generate resources that then you can use in the future, like furs or other harvestable resources. It also creates places on the map where you can build improvements in the future that provide unique benefits. So it's an important part of exploration, is dealing with what's out there in the natural world.
So speaking of exploration, once you do start venturing out in the world and you start meeting these other nations, I'm assuming that there's two results that can happen. You can obviously have a peaceful result where you work together as multiple nations, or you can be hostile. And leading into that, I want to talk more about the actual combat in the game, how that gameplay loop is working as far as the resources that you'll need, building your armies, attacking other nations, defending yourself from other nations. And say you do conquer, I know this is a lot, but you do conquer a nation. What is the end result of that? Are you able to take over that territory? Do they become a part of your nation? Or how is that being managed in the game?
Yeah, you can. As you said, there's as there is in human history, warfare is part of the game. Sometimes conflict happens, and we wanted to represent that as accurately as possible. I would say one of the ways in which I think this game is special, again, in that kind of in the scope of large historical grand strategy, is that we've brought in some of the mechanics around combat that you might typically see in other types of games. So yes, you can build units in this game. Yes, you can create armies from those units. Yes, you can move them around the map. But the game doesn't just devolve into kind of a unit movement tactics game.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to take something that was a little bit more kind of accurately representative of the way conflict plays out between nations in the real world. And ultimately, conflict is both about military might, but it's also about the kind of the infrastructure behind that and the economics of warfare, right? And so I think you'll find that, especially as you get deeper into the game and more into the Middle Ages, and then especially in the modern era, like maintaining the economic power that you need and the industrial and manufacturing power that you need to deploy strong, large military formations is just as important as the kind of initial recruiting and training and figuring out who you want to go get into conflict with in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that war has a cost. It has a cost in the real world. It has a cost here too. And so if you are going to go to war with an opponent, there is a potential negative impact on your prestige. People don't always like it when you're always going to war with them, and that's included in our game mechanics as well. So you have the combat level where you're fighting with different formations that are comprised of maybe multiple types of units that take advantage of different bonuses that could come from that. And then you also are thinking about what type of war am I engaging in? Is it a skirmish war? Is it one where I'm really just trying to take over the nearest city? Is it a war of expansion where this person is on my borders and I'd like to expand my nation? Or am I really looking to remove a nation from gameplay? Am I looking for like a full military victory? So we have combat, of course, on the unit and formation level, which is interesting, but we're also considering what type of warfare are you engaging in. With each type come different types of rewards and costs, both to declaring war and potentially losing it.
Excellent. Now, this actually kind of leads me right into the government and the political aspects of the game, because I think that's what excites me the most about this, that it seems like you're really going to be deep diving into that. So we talked about the war aspect of this, dealing with other nations. What about from a political side of it? Can you have peaceful results in this? Can you have those type of negotiations where you can avert war altogether?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And in fact, you talk about conflict, and maybe framed as you're either allies or enemies. And in actual fact, what I find kind of most interesting in terms of the types of conflict that at least I run into when I play Oxide's game, when I play Ara, is when I run into other nations where the leaders are like somewhere in the middle, where they're like, they're neither like polarized, like incredibly hostile or incredibly in love with me, but what I do is I run into a nation, I'm like, okay, they're kind of like skeptical of me, right? Maybe they want to be friendly, but I'm land is precious. I've claimed some territories close to their nation. That makes them skeptical. Maybe we have some traits like every leader has different traits, and depending on how well those traits line up with other leaders' belief systems, you might get sort of a naturally more tending towards hostile nation or naturally more trending towards friendly nation. And so you end up meeting somebody who's like, yeah, we should be friends, but everyone's skeptical, right? And now I'm kind of in this dance of, okay, I need something from them. I want to trade with them. Getting my merchants and roads built to their cities and being able to move my troops through their territories is valuable. It's also valuable to them to do that in reverse.
Right.
But we're in this little dance of like, am I getting more from you than you're getting from me?
Right.
And maybe if I sort of start to win that dance and I'm like, open up a bunch of trade routes, then their sort of trustworthiness towards me is starting to go down. So I have to like give them some gifts to sort of boost that back up. But to do that, I've got to understand what is it that they really want. And so maybe I turn some of my manufacturing capability specifically designed towards gifting to this nation to keep them from falling into that hostile category, and sort of like playing that diplomatic and trading dance with other nations is a form of conflict. But I actually find it way more interesting than just like rolling troops, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. I think that is the aspect of the game that excites me the most, because sure, we've seen in previous games where you can just have all out war, but I would want to have that more nuanced thing where I have to start thinking about the repercussions of, like you said, the economics of it, the resources, the trading, everything that goes with that. But I do want to dive into government, because like I said, that's, I think, seems to be the really intriguing thing here, just taking care of my own nation, from a government standpoint. So if I understand correctly, I mean, you're going to need to dictate policies in the game. There's going to be taxes in the game. It also makes me ask the question, how does religion impact government in the game? Because you also talked about keeping your people happy. So what is that balance that you'll have with government and religion in the game?
Yeah, I think like stepping back, I think you
Yeah.
made the correct assumption and statement that it's government, it's quality of life of your citizens, and religion.
Yeah.
All of these things have deep connections. So with your government, what government you choose has inherent impacts on your population, on your people, and also on different buffs and bonuses that are given to your nation. Then you're able to look into different base policies. Depending on what policy you choose, you'll be given certain benefits. And an additional level, you can choose your level of taxation. Just in real life, taxes make people feel a certain way.
Right.
So you have different levels of taxation that you can employ. This has an impact on the quality of life for your citizens. And you see that with religion as well. When you found a religion, you have the ability to choose different religious verses. And these verses also provide bonuses either to your people or to different types of strategic gameplay that you have to make choices about. What are the verses in your religion that really are the foundation of their belief system? And you see that reflected in the bonuses that are given to that player. Another really important element, I think, of fostering the quality of life and the government, the internal policies, is our event system. So you'll be running into events throughout the game that have to do with your relationship with tribes at the start, your relationship with other nations, or in response to the players' choices in the world. And almost all of these events will have an impact on your nation, either the quality of life of your citizens or potentially your relationship with another nation. If another nation's leader comes to you and says, hey, help us, and you say no, that is going to have an impact on your diplomacy. And the choices you make there too could have an impact on your government, on your citizens, because it might lower their happiness, the choice that you make. So these are all really important when considering what is the internal working of my nation.
Oh, that is fantastic. So as you were saying that made me think of one scenario, and we might be having some real world scenarios of this right now. But when it comes to trade with other nations, let's just say that I've kind of dominated the map in this session that I was playing. So I kind of have a monopoly on a particular resource in the game. Another nation comes to me, they need that resource, they want to make trade. Am I able to dictate those terms of what the trade would look like? So obviously I would want it heavily skewed in my favor. And if I do it too much, could this spark that nation to be unhappy with me and potentially go to war over this resource?
Yeah, so the way trade works in the game is, like all of the game, is built around the kind of demands of how simultaneous turns need to work as well, right? So you have to take into account that one of the kind of core principles for Ara was that everything work with players taking their turns independently and then resolving everything at the same time. So that plays into trade as well, in the sense that as the kind of leader of your nation, your goal is to decide at a high level, do you want to open a trade agreement with another nation or not? When you do that, you can see both what they will be making available to your merchants and what you will be making available to their merchants. After you've agreed in principle on that high level trade agreement, and you've got, through your government and through other buffs and improvements that you've built, you understand how many merchants you have and how many merchants they have. Then you go in and you decide what you're getting, like what you want to get from their nation. They independently, again, because of simultaneous turns, decide what they want to get from your nation.
Okay.
If at any point you're unhappy with that balance, you break off the trade agreement. Now, doing that may have other downstream implications in terms of how happy they are with you or vice versa. But that's fundamentally kind of how it works, trying to give players as much autonomy as possible to decide how that trade balance is going to work within the kind of confines of what you have unlocked through your kind of your trade capacity through merchants, while also making sure that that we're not entering into a back and forth real-time negotiation over minutia, because then that breaks the principle of simultaneous turns. Does that make sense?
No, makes total sense. Total sense. And I'm looking at our time, so we're unfortunately run out of time, and I got another questions I want to ask, but I'll try and end it on this. And this leans more towards the multiplayer side of it, but I guess this could also happen in AI as well. So everything that we've talked about with the nations and the map size and how many there can be there, are there scenarios where multiple nations can basically decide to team up and go after you, like basically try to outnumber you in a scenario, especially thinking about that in a multiplayer session?
There's alliances in the game.
Okay.
There
we
are.
go.
And I will say, having played multiplayer in the office with my colleagues, I have one coworker who always declares war. So we see it coming. We're like, we know what Parth is going to do. Parth is going to declare war on us. So like, let's get ready. So it works in multiplayer with chat. If you're playing with people who you haven't met before, or if you're playing with friends, if you're using Discord, you can be like, all right, it's time to prepare for our friend who we know is going to declare war on us. That definitely happens in multiplayer. And it also, I've seen it happen when I'm playing with just AI nations. I have recently teamed up with Wilma Mankiller, and she and I were allies, and we won a war against someone who is a very aggressive AI nation. So you can find yourself in alliances both with AI nations, or when you're playing a multiplayer, you can team up with your friends to be that one person who's going to war with you.
All right. So can you kind of talk about Ara History Untold, the 4 key things that are going to differentiate itself in the genre?
Oh, 4. Okay. Brian, I'll give you my 4 and we'll see if they align with your 4. So first is, I think, the living world. In this type of historical grand strategy game, you're often playing really zoomed out. You're exploring the world, understanding the world on a tile by tile basis. But Ara deviates in this way, and in some ways goes into that space of like a city builder or a simulation, where our world is something you can zoom into. So you can really get down to the granular level of seeing individual blades of grass. You can see a mama bear and a baby bear just going through the woods. You can watch, I actually have seen narwhals swimming in the ocean.
Oh, wow.
Which was a surprise and a joy. Yeah. So I think the living world, that level of immersion and detail, is one really unique factor. Brian, what would you say your number 2 is? If that's number 1, what's number 2 in your mind?
Well, the second one is got to be just that the whole game was designed from the ground up for simultaneous turns, which means that everybody is taking their turn at the same time, which just shortens the amount of time that you're waiting in general when playing, and also makes large-scale multiplayer possible in the first place, right? Because you're not waiting on 35 other people to take their turn before it gets back around to you.
Yes, I definitely can't go back. I already had a hard time waiting, but now that I know how quickly it can go, I'm like, let's go for it. Let's go at it. I think my number 3 would be our prestige system. So the prestige system allows players to do a grab bag approach to making their mark on history. You're not locked in just being a military power, or just a cultural powerhouse, or just a nation that's focused on industry. You can write your own history, and that includes having a military victory where maybe you defended yourself from an aggressive nation. It can mean getting prestige from making your citizens happy, from having golden ages where you really excelled in building triumphs, architectural marvels, where you had alliances, as well as gaining prestige from having one of the world's most well-known, well-recognized, and practiced religions. So this ability to have different sources of prestige, and all of them count and all of them matter, is something that is really unique and exciting in my opinion. That's 3. We got a 4?
Yeah. I want to say, just with 3, I mean, that's more than enough right there. I just think what you're talking about is what should excite people that are brand new into the genre, that maybe they've seen some of the other games and are a little intimidated to want to jump in and play. The simultaneous turns obviously is going to be a big deal, but even the prestige and allowing you to, even on the fly, maybe you started off as, I want to be a military power, and then you can pivot halfway through. Like, hey, I want to take a more passive approach to it, right? I want to be an industrial power, cultural power, or whatever the case. I think having that flexibility in this game should be very exciting to veterans and newcomers alike. So even if it's 3, I think that counts as 4 because it was a lot in those 3. But again, I will say, Gabriela and Brian, I do appreciate your time. I appreciate you spending a little bit talking to me about Ara History Untold, which will be coming out on September 24th on PC. Really looking forward to it. And I think anyone watching or listening to this should be very excited for it. So can't wait for the 24th.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. Can't wait for people to play.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.